I stared in disbelief at the woman standing on my doorstep, suitcase in hand. "Eloise, what are you doing here?" My mother-in-law brushed past me without an invitation. "Well, aren't you going to let me in, dear? I've come to help with the baby." "Help?" I repeated dumbly. My protests were drowned out by the sound of my husband's voice. "Mom, what a wonderful surprise." Dean hurried over and enveloped Eloise in a hug. I watched the scene unfold with rising panic. This couldn't be happening. Eloise was now disentangling herself from Dean's embrace, tutting loudly. "Honestly, you two? This place is a mess. Have either of you lifted a finger to prepare for the baby?" Before I could respond, Dean jumped in. "You're right, Mom. We've been swamped with work. It'll be a huge help having you here." My mouth dropped open. "A help? Dean, we never discussed this." He shot me an apologetic glance. "Babe, don't be like that. My mom just wants what's best for us." Eloise nodded vigorously. "Of course, dear. A new mother needs guidance, after all." Her eyes bored into mine with thinly veiled disdain. I felt something inside me shrivel. This was exactly how it started with Jillian, Dean's sister. Eloise had swept in after Jillian's first child, running roughshod over every boundary until a bitter rift formed. Now she had her sights set on sinking her claws into my family, too. "I don't need any guidance," I bit out. "We're doing just fine on our own." Dean's brow furrowed in that familiar stubborn line. "Don't be rude, Corinne. My mom is trying to help." "Yes, I am." Eloise looped her arm through Dean's in a practiced motion. "But if my support isn't wanted, I understand." Her gaze slid to me, eyes glistening with artificial hurt. I clenched my jaw, fury warring with desperation. I knew how this game ended. If I held my ground, I'd be the vilified one, the ungrateful daughter-in-law who shamed her devoted husband by rejecting his loving mother's overtures. When Dean's pleading expression joined the fray, I felt the last of my resistance crumble. "Fine," I gritted out. "She can stay." Eloise's smile was a rictus of false warmth. "Thank you, dear. I'll try not to be a burden." I caught the gleam of triumph in her eyes and felt the first cold tendrils of dread uncurling in my heart. By allowing Eloise across the threshold, I'd granted her a foothold, and I had the terrible feeling she wouldn't relinquish it without one hell of a fight. True to her word, Eloise was indeed a burden from the moment she arrived. Within days, she had critiqued everything from my housekeeping to my wardrobe. "Really, Corinne, you're going to wear that? It does nothing for your figure." She clicked her tongue in disapproval as I pulled on a loose maternity top. Dean, ever the peacekeeper, tried to intervene. "Mom, lay off." "Corinne looks great." But Eloise merely waved him off. "Of course you'd say that, dear, but a mother needs to speak some hard truths sometimes." Her eyes bored into me again with that familiar disdain. I bit back the urge to snap at her, knowing it would only make me the vilified one in Dean's eyes. I felt the old anger and hurt churning in my gut, the same volatile stew I'd fought so hard not to inflict on my own mother. The final insult came a few days later when I caught Eloise clearing out space in the nursery closet. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my tenuous hold on civility fraying. Eloise didn't even turn around. "Just making room for a few necessities, dear. You can't raise a baby in this pigsty." White, hot fury propelled me forward until I was right behind her. "Those are my things! You can't just throw them out!" "Oh." Eloise arched one perfectly groomed brow. "And where, pray tell? Were you planning to put the changing table? The crib? This tiny space can barely fit the basics." "We were going to move the changing table into the bedroom," I growled through gritted teeth. Eloise tutted again, that same infuriating noise. "Don't be ridiculous. You'll both need your rest. Keeping the baby in your room will only lead to squabbling and sleep deprivation." "It's our baby." The words burst from me like shrapnel. "We'll raise it how we see fit." In an instant, Eloise's expression shifted from feigned concern to cold disdain. "Is that so? From where I'm standing, you're the one acting like a child, dear." My hands clenched into fists, barely resisting the urge to lash out physically. Before I could retort, the sound of Dean's footsteps reached my ears. I watched helplessly as Eloise smoothed her face into a mask of serene innocence. When Dean entered, I fought to keep my composure. "Your mother is throwing out our things." "What?" Dean's gaze swiveled between us, plainly bewildered. "Mom, what's going on?" "Nothing, sweetie." Eloise was the picture of aggrieved gentility. "I was merely trying to make some space. But if Corinne would rather the baby sleep in squalor... That's not what I said. I could hear the shrillness in my own voice. Dean held up his hands in a placating gesture. Hey, let's all just take it easy, okay? The sickly sweet smile was back as Eloise laid a hand on his arm. Of course, honey, you know I only want what's best for you both. In that moment, I saw it all too clearly. Her maddening gaslighting, her manipulation of Dean's emotions to undermine me. Her flagrant disrespect for any boundaries I tried to set. This was why Jillian's family had cut ties. And if I didn't do something soon, Eloise would drive the same explosive wedge into my own marriage. A few days later, I escaped to my friend Maya's house, needing a break from the suffocating tension. I just don't know what to do, I vented as soon as she opened the door. Eloise is driving me crazy. She questions everything I do, oversteps every boundary. Maya ushered me inside, her expression one of sympathy. That's awful, Corinne. Why don't you just kick her out? I've tried. I sank onto her sofa with a groan. But Dean refuses to see how toxic she is. He's completely under her spell. Shaking her head, Maya sat beside me. Men can be so oblivious when it comes to their mothers. Have you tried talking to him again? Yeah, and it's always the same thing. She means well, Corinne. Don't be so hard on her. I threw up my hands in frustration. Meanwhile, Eloise acts like a sweet little angel whenever he's around. That manipulative witch, Maya muttered. I nodded miserably. Exactly. And the worst part is, she's already turning this pregnancy into a total nightmare. Can you believe she invited people over for some stupid baby prep party without even asking me? Maya's eyes widened. She didn't. Oh, she did. My jaw clenched at the memory. Just barged into the kitchen, announcing it like it was a done deal. I've invited the Hendersons and the Wilsons to come over this Saturday to help get things ready. Maya shook her head slowly. That's a major violation of privacy, not to mention safety concerns with strangers in your home. Tell me about it. I laughed bitterly. When I tried protesting, Eloise turned it around like I was the rude one, putting up roadblocks instead of embracing the village that was coming together for us. That's insane. Maya's eyes flashed with anger. She can't just appropriate your pregnancy like that. According to her, she absolutely can. When Dean backed her up on it, I trailed off, feeling defeated all over again. Maya's hand found mine, giving it a comforting squeeze. Hey, you can't let her get away with steamrolling you like this. That's exactly what she wants. Her words struck a chord. Eloise did want to dominate me, to usurp control over every aspect of my life under the guise of helping. Anger flared in my chest, burning away the hopelessness. You're right, I said, jaw set with new determination. I can't just roll over for her insanity. Enough is enough. Maya grinned fiercely. So what's the plan? 100 possibilities flickered through my mind, each more outrageous than the last. But one in particular made me pause. A half-formed scheme taking root. Actually, I said slowly, I might have an idea. A few days after my visit with Maya, the final straw came in the form of a shattered vase. I returned home from running errands to find Eloise rummaging through my closet again. Clothes and shoes were strewn everywhere. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, hands clenching into fists. Eloise didn't even turn around. Such language, Corinne. Hardly befitting for a mother. Befitting? I echoed, anger making my voice tremble. How about basic privacy and respect? That got her attention. Eloise swiveled to face me, mouth pinched in displeasure. Don't be so dramatic, dear. I was merely trying to clear out some space. By destroying my closet? Those are my things. Clutter and chaos, more like. She sniffed disdainfully. You'll thank me once the nursery is ready. Something inside me snapped at her sheer entitlement. Get out, I bit out through gritted teeth. Get out of my house right now. Eloise's eyes went wide with unconvincing hurt. Corinne, surely you don't mean... I mean it, I overrode her sharply. You've overstayed any welcome you might have had. Pack your things and leave. For a moment, she seemed taken aback by my vehemence. But her recovery was swift, lips curling into a disdainful smile. You poor, deluded girl. You honestly believe you have any authority here? Her tone was laced with patronizing pity. This is my son's home, and whether you like it or not, I'll always have a place in it. White-hot fury lanced through me. Before I could retort, the sound of shattering glass rent the air as my foot knocked over a vase. Eloise's hand flew to her mouth in theatrical dismay. "You clumsy child! Those were antique Venetian, you foolish girl!" I opened my mouth, any remaining respect I'd harbored for this woman withering on my tongue. But it was Dean's voice that cut through the tension. "What's going on?" I heard a crash. He took in the scene with bewildered eyes, the clothes strewn everywhere, my flushed cheeks, Eloise's look of carefully crafted dismay. Before I could say a word, she pounced. "Oh, sweetie, it was simply dreadful. I was only trying to help organize a bit, and Corinne just flew into a rage." "What?" I choked out. "That's not shattered that priceless vase your grandmother left me in a fit of uncontrolled temper." Eloise went on, tears welling artfully in her eyes. "I did not." I turned desperately to Dean. "She was going through my things again without permission." But the damage was done. Dean's expression was a kaleidoscope of conflicting emotions, disappointment, anger, hurt, all directed at me. "That's enough," he said lowly. "We'll discuss this later. Mom, why don't you go lie down?" With a tremulous sob, Eloise nodded and exited the room. I was left alone with Dean, suddenly bone-weary under the weight of his stony glare. "Well?" he prompted after a stilted silence. "What do you have to say for yourself?" I opened my mouth, 1,000 recriminations on my tongue. But in that moment I knew no defense would be enough to sway him. Dean was too entrenched in his blind support of his mother. My shoulders sagged in defeat. What was the point of fighting a war I couldn't win? That night, as I lay awake in bed, the first flickers of another strategy began taking shape. If shouting matches and explosive confrontations failed, perhaps a more subtle approach was needed. Eloise wanted to undermine me? Well, two could play at that game. Only this time I'd strike with stealth and cunning rather than blunt force. After all, she'd taught me well in the art of deception and revenge. The next morning, I awoke with a newfound sense of purpose. As Eloise swept into the kitchen, serene as ever, I forced a placating smile. "Good morning. I'm so sorry about my outburst yesterday. The pregnancy hormones, you know." I let out a self-deprecating chuckle. Eloise's eyes narrowed fractionally before she smoothed her features. "Well, I certainly understand how unsettling this transition can be, dear." "Exactly." I nodded in agreement. "Which is why I'm so grateful to have your guidance. You're absolutely right. I need to start nesting and embrace the village rallying around us." Her smugness was palpable, suspicion forgotten. "I'm pleased you've finally come to your senses." Over the next few days, I played the part of the reformed, compliant daughter-in-law to perfection. When Eloise criticized my cleaning methods, I listened meekly. As she reorganized the house to her liking, I uttered not a word of protest. All the while, I began piecing together my real plan. The first step was contacting Jillian, Dean's estranged sister. Though our relationship was strained due to Eloise's meddling, she proved a wellspring of information about our mother-in-law's past manipulations. "I've got boxes of evidence," Jillian confided when we met for coffee. "Emails, texts, you name it, all documenting the cruel, underhanded ways Mom drove a wedge between me and my husband until he couldn't take it anymore." I listened with equal parts horror and vindication as she recounted dozens of instances just like the ones I'd endured, only far worse. Next, I began stockpiling my own proof. Each time Eloise bounded a line, I hit record on my phone to capture the rants and diatribes when Dean wasn't present, her feigned politeness giving way to biting derision and judgment. "Who does she think she is, contradicting me like that?" she fumed after one argument about baby supplies. "She's worse than a child. At least children still mind their elders." Through it all, I maintained my facade of humbleness and compliance. Let Eloise have her shallow victory for now. She could swan around playing the martyr, the voice of reason, right up until her own actions undid her. The final piece fell into place when Maya helped me get in touch with 2 other daughters-in-law who'd been driven apart from their families by Eloise's poisonous influence. "Sarah and I used to be so close," Patty lamented, "but after our first big fight, which Mom masterfully instigated, she went running straight into her arms for support. I never stood a chance against that emotional blackmail." Their anecdotes were eerily similar. Seeds of discord planted, allegiances divided, families torn asunder, all through Eloise's insidious machinations. By the time I hung up the phone that night, my path was clear. If this was the only way to wrest back control, to protect my family from the toxicity Eloise represented, then so be it. The next morning at breakfast, I was all sugary smiles as Eloise breezed in. "I've been thinking," I began lightly. "With the baby's arrival getting closer, I really want to clear the air, do something to bring everyone together again as a family." Eloise paused mid-sip of coffee, intrigued by my uncharacteristic olive branch. "Oh, what did you have in mind, dear?" My lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "A family dinner, actually. I think it's time we all had a long, overdue discussion about the future." The night of the family dinner, I was near vibrating with nervous anticipation. Despite my outward calm, it took every ounce of effort to keep my hands from shaking as I set the table. Right on schedule, the doorbell rang. I pulled open the door to find Jillian shifting awkwardly on the front step, her husband Rick beside her. "Thanks for coming," I murmured, ushering them inside. Jillian's expression was tight, her gaze flicking around like a trapped animal. "You're sure about this, Corinne?" Before I could respond, Maya arrived with Patty and Sarah in tow. A chorus of startled greetings filled the air as Eloise swept in from the kitchen. Well, what an unexpected reunion. Her eyes danced between the assembled families, mouth curved in a politically bland smile. "How lovely to have you all here." The calculated pleasantry grated, threatening my hard-won composure. I could see Jillian tense beside me, no doubt reading the same insincerity. Thankfully, Dean chose that moment to join us. "Hey, everyone's here. Should we get started?" I forced a bright smile. Actually, I thought we could wait for the final guests to arrive. Right on cue, the doorbell rang again. This time it was the Conway family, former in-laws who had cut ties with Eloise over a decade ago after an epic blowout regarding their grandchildren. Complete silence reigned as Eloise registered their presence, a muscle twitching in her artificially smooth cheek. "Judith, Thomas, how unexpected." Judith offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Really, Eloise? After all you've put our family through, you can't fathom why we're here." For the first time, I detected a flicker of unease in Eloise's perfectly cultivated mask, but her recovery was as swift as ever, the sickly sweet smile reappearing. Now, let's not let old grudges spoil the evening." "Cut the crap, Mom," Jillian suddenly burst out. All eyes swiveled her way as she took an unconscious step forward. "We're not falling for your gaslighting routine again." Eloise's expression shuddered, eyes glinting with cold fury despite the saccharine tone. "Jillian, darling, whatever are you? You manipulative, lying witch." It was Patty who exploded next, all her grievances bubbling over. "You destroyed my relationship with Sarah just like you tried with these others." The room erupted into a maelstrom of shouting voices, accusations flying, tempers flaring, decades of bitterness and pain unleashed. Through it all, Eloise stood ramrod straight, eyes blazing, veneer of civility disintegrating. At some point, Dean's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough! What the hell is going on here?" An eerie hush followed his bellow. I could see the stunned hurt writ across his features as the reality of the situation dawned. My mouth was dry as chalk, but I knew this was the moment. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone and met Eloise's gaze steadily. "You might want to have a seat for this." The first recording began to play, anger and condescension dripping from Eloise's tinny voice as she ranted about me. Then another file, more vicious put-downs and criticisms, and another after that, the damning evidence piling up one after another. Eloise paled, seemingly struck dumb. Dean's expression morphed from disbelief to stunned hurt to white-hot rage, as each new vileness issuing from his mother's lips assailed him. By the time the final recording clicked off, a profound silence had fallen over the room. I could see it all clicking into place for Dean, the missing puzzle pieces, the half-sensed deceptions. Finally he turned to Eloise, face like chiseled stone. "Get out!" Her mouth worked soundlessly as she struggled to find her footing. "Sweetheart, you don't understand." "I said get out!" Dean's roar made us all flinch. "I want you gone, Mom, tonight." To her credit, Eloise didn't argue further, shoulders slumped in rare defeat. She turned and walked out of the dining room, out of our lives. Only then did the euphoric chatter and embraces erupt around me. But all I could feel was the searing ball of hatred still burning in my belly, despite my victory. Because as satisfying as her downfall was, I knew it was only the beginning of making her pay. A tense silence fell over the dining room after Eloise's abrupt exit. I could sense the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions, accusations, and recriminations hanging in the air between Dean and the assembled families. Judith Conway was the first to break it. "Dean, I know this is a shock, but your mother's behavior—" "Don't." Dean's voice was little more than a ragged croak as he held up a hand. "Just don't." He dragged his palm down his face, suddenly looking decades older. When his eyes finally lifted to meet mine, they were haunted. "You knew about all of this vindictiveness, the cruelty." It wasn't quite an accusation, more a pleading for context, for something to make sense of the shattered reality before him. I swallowed hard against the surge of bitterness that welled in my throat. How many times had I tried explaining only to be brushed aside? But righteous anger would only push him further away now. "I suspected for a while," I admitted quietly, "but I could never get through to you, Dean. Eloise was always able to gaslight me, twist the reality to make me seem irrational." He flinched slightly at her name, then sank heavily into a dining chair. The wariness emanating from him was a physical force. "So that's why you brought everyone here." Rick broke the stilted silence, realization dawning. "To gang up and force the truth." I opened my mouth to protest the callous phrasing, but Patty jumped in quickly. "Not gang up," she said firmly. "Corinne had to take drastic steps because of how thoroughly Eloise isolated us all, divided and conquered to maintain control." A dull flush crept up Dean's neck as he digested her words. I could practically see the pieces clicking into place, memories and long-buried doubts resurfacing to be viewed under a new, but unerringly honest light. Jillian reached across the table, placing a tentative hand over his. "I didn't want to believe it at first either. Not about Mom." Her lips twisted in a rueful approximation of a smile, but her awfulness became impossible to ignore after a while. Dean's jaw clenched hard, eyes glistening with shame, anger, a kaleidoscope of volatile emotions. When he spoke again, the words emerged muffled, as if forced between gritted teeth. "All this time? The horrible things she said about you." His haunted gaze found mine again, as the gravity of his betrayal seemed to crash over him in waves. While I just stood by and let her. A pregnant pause lingered as the accusation remained unspoken. In that moment, I could have lashed out, unleashed the full fury of my spite and grievances upon him. But something in his ravaged expression stayed my tongue. Because as righteous as my anger burned, his anguish ran equally deep. My husband had been gaslit, masterfully manipulated by a toxic parent, just like the others in this room. His world had been upended as thoroughly as mine once was, so instead of dealing further blows, I rose and crossed to where he sat, slumped. Ignoring the others' questioning stares, I reached out and drew his head against my stomach, cradling him against the swell of my pregnancy. "It's going to be okay," I murmured, feeling his ragged breaths against my abdomen. "We're going to be okay." Dean stiffened for a moment, then seemed to melt into my embrace like a marionette with its strings cut. I stroked his hair lightly as his shoulders began to shake with silent sobs, offering him this rare shelter and solace. This was a new beginning, I realized, one built on a foundation of brutal truth, but truth nonetheless. Whatever came next, we would face it together as partners rather than adversaries. The cycle of toxicity and deception was broken. That night, as we fell into an exhausted sleep tangled in each other's arms, I understood the true cost of vengeance was not violence or hatred, but mercy. Mercy hard-won and bestowed upon the humbled. Only then could the past be laid to rest, making way for a brighter future. In the weeks after Eloise's banishment, an uneasy calm descended over our household. Dean and I walked on eggshells around each other, both still processing the cataclysmic shift in our reality. He spent long hours at work, as if immersing himself in familiar routines could undo Eloise's ruinous legacy. When he was home, a brittle tension crackled between us, both skirting the emotional minefield her deceptions had laid. I understood his withdrawal, his need to compartmentalize. God knew I'd erected my own fortresses over the years to survive Eloise's psychological warfare. But even those thick-walled defenses were straining under the weight of all that had transpired. The turning point came one night over a stilted dinner of reheated leftovers. Dean set down his fork with a dull clank. "This isn't working." I froze mid-bite, heart jackrabbiting as terrible scenarios flickered through my mind. Was this the moment our marriage finally buckled, shattered by the strain of Eloise's machinations? But when I met his gaze, I saw only weary resolution. We can't keep living like this, Corinne. Tiptoeing around each other, sidestepping what happened. He exhaled a frustrated breath, raking a hand through his hair. I don't know where to start unraveling the tangled mess my mother created. But I do know shutting you out again isn't the answer. Something inside me unclenched at his words. I'm not going anywhere, I said impulsively. We'll get through this together. Dean's lips twitched in a reluctant half-smile as he reached across the table for my hand. Together. I like the sound of that. From that point, the walls between us began to gradually dismantle. In their place, an honest dialogue emerged, one founded on empathy, patience, and a mutual desire to shed Eloise's corrosive influence once and for all. Over long conversations, all the hurts and betrayals were slowly exhumed. The constant belittling, the manufactured conflicts designed to drive wedges, the insidious gaslighting that had us both questioning our reality. Laying it all bare was an excruciatingly painful process. But with each buried wound exposed and lanced, I felt lighter, more whole. Roles reversed too, as Dean opened up with a raw vulnerability I'd never witnessed before. He spoke of being the idealized son, the golden child who could never escape Eloise's web of demands and criticisms despite his devotion. I think a part of me always longed for her approval, he confessed haltingly, which is why I was so blind to her cruelties, no matter who tried warning me. In turn, I divulged the bone-deep fears Eloise had awoken, of being alone and outmatched as a new mother, of tainting our child's upbringing with echoes of the dysfunction that marred my own childhood. You saved me from that, I admitted, cradling my rounded belly. Saved us both. By the time the last of our lacerations had been cleansed and bound, I felt closer to Dean than I had in years. Not simply spouses united by domesticity, but partners buckling back to withstand the onslaught of trauma. Our bedroom became a sanctuary again, a sacred space reclaimed from the toxic taint of Eloise's influence. Physical intimacy took on new, profound dimensions as we relearned each other's boundaries and needs. Countless tender moments stitched past wounds into a new, stronger whole. The nursery, too, was an exercise in co-creation. Dean and I labored side by side, meticulously outfitting the space with every necessity and not a single item imposed by his mother's interference. We emerged scarred, yes, but also formidably unified, an immovable bulwark erected to deflect any resurgence of Eloise's malice. When our daughter arrived 2 months later, squalling and perfect, we were girded for the challenges ahead. Absolutely nothing would disrupt the hard-won peace of our newly reclaimed lives. As I cradled my newborn's warmth against my chest, I knew this child would never want for security, stability, love. Those insidious cycles of toxicity ended with us. Eloise's shadow no longer touched this family. We had stepped finally into the light.
My brother is retiring, so we are going to Germany with our parents today. Your credit card for the trip, and you know how to party copyright 1996 by Leia and I.E. What a trip this will be. What are you talking about? Just what I said. I mean, what the hell do you get when I say just what I said? Please explain. We need to hurry. I get it. We'll go soon. Sorry, I have to move on now. I can go in the area, but will not hear any details as such. Isn't the credit card going to? On a trip with my jobless husband, Jeremy, who thinks he can put it on my credit card for our parents-in-law. Jeremy might be a pain, yeah, but I think I have just found my perfect chance to send his ass on the fast track to Detoothedingville. And he will return from the trip, regretting quite a few things. I'm Emily, a 35-year-old company employee. After graduating from a prestigious university, I landed a job at a major company and have received good evaluations. Despite being only 35, my income is enough to support Jeremy, who doesn't work, and a child if we had one. But that's hypothetical. We've been married for 6 years and don't have kids yet, though we're thinking about it soon. Blessed with a good job and income, I should be happy in my newly life, but I'm not. The part about having a child is hypothetical, but Jeremy not working isn't. I'm not hungry for dinner because I ate snacks. That's fine, but what about your job search? I didn't go for an interview today. I just stayed home looking at job websites. Jeremy quit his job a year ago and has been job hunting since. To be precise, he's been working part-time but doesn't stick with any job for long. He starts a job, quits soon after, relaxes for a while, then looks for another part-time job. You're looking at part-time jobs again, aren't you? I'm looking at both full-time and part-time. Why don't you stop looking for part-time jobs and focus on finding a full-time position? I know, but there is a right time for everything. I wish Jeremy would find a steady job, but there's a reason he can't be pushed too hard. He quit his last job because of a conflict over work policies with his boss. That boss was notoriously difficult in the office. Jeremy stood up to the boss as the office representative, backed by his colleagues, but when the conflict escalated, his colleagues sided with the boss, not with Jeremy. As a result, Jeremy lost his boss's approval, felt betrayed by his colleagues, and found it hard to stay, so he left the company. Jeremy, dinner's ready. Can you bring it here? After quitting, Jeremy became reclusive, staying in his room. After about 3 weeks, he started coming out and helping with household chores. All the dishes, really. Thanks, then it's all yours. Yeah, I've got nothing but time, Jeremy said, smiling, but it didn't seem genuine. Yet after another 3 weeks, he started job hunting. I have an interview today. Is it your top choice? Yeah, I'm going to get this job and start over. I'm rooting for you. Do your best. A month after quitting, Jeremy began job hunting in earnest. But even after a month, he couldn't find a job. Why am I always rejected? Damn it, it's all my previous company's fault. Don't get frustrated. You'll find something good. Of course, I'm frustrated. I did nothing wrong. Jeremy might not be entirely blameless, but what happened at his last job wasn't entirely his fault either. Still, quitting because of interpersonal issues doesn't look good to potential employers. It's like I can't do anything right anymore. That's not true. You have an interview tomorrow. Let's work on your resume. It's pointless. I'm not going tomorrow. Repeated rejections wore Jeremy down, but after a while, he became defiant. One day, I came home to find torn-up resumes on the living room floor. Knowing the interview didn't go well, I chose my words carefully. Can you throw that trash in the bin? I'm done. Done with what? Job hunting. We can live on your income, right? I don't need to work. Indeed, we could live on my income alone. Some people don't work and do a great job as full-time homemakers, but that's not Jeremy's situation. He's just avoiding unpleasant realities. I understand his reluctance to work after the bad experience at his last job and the unsuccessful job hunt, but we need to address this issue head-on. I decided to be patient with Jeremy for a while. Jeremy, you still haven't found a job. What's your plan? I've worked hard before. This is just an extended break. I'm not just resting, I'm studying for the future. That's good to hear. Living near my in-laws, Jeremy's mother Linda and father Brandon started visiting us more often after he quit his job. They were probably worried about him. Hearing that Jeremy was preparing for his next job, they seemed relieved, but that was a blatant lie. The beer will run out today. Can you buy some on your way home? It's running out again. You drink too much. Try to cut down a bit. Fine, I won't ask you again. I'll buy it myself. Jeremy wasn't studying or job hunting. He spent his days watching TV and drinking beer. He probably didn't want others to know he was unemployed. If I told my in-laws the truth, It might hurt Jeremy too much, so I decided to stay silent about whatever excuses Jeremy made. But he stopped job hunting for over 5 months, and I finally decided to speak up. Jeremy, maybe it's time to start job hunting. You seem more settled now. What? It's been less than half a year since the incident at my last job. You want me to work again after what happened? I just thought the break was a bit long. Stop nagging. You can't understand my feelings since your job is going well. I have my own struggles, you know. Everyone has work problems and relationship issues. We all try to solve them. Let's work through this together. I get it. I'll look for a job. Okay. Jeremy walked out in the middle of the conversation. My words seemed to have hurt him, but him agreeing to job hunt seemed like progress. I decided to apologize when he was feeling better. I got a job because of your nagging. That's great. Where? At a nearby supermarket. So you'll need to learn and work hard, right? It's just part-time. No need to work too hard. Part-time or not, even part-time is a job. Do you have a problem with that? I wanted to say something to Jeremy, but maybe getting a little work could be a step toward his recovery. I decided to watch and see. I'm home. Jeremy, you're back. How's the job? I quit the supermarket part-time. Why? It hasn't been that long. A college student there was being bossy, telling me to always put the vegetable boxes at the bottom in storage. It felt like harassment. That student was likely just teaching Jeremy the job. In the workplace, even a college student is a senior. Jeremy kept finding and quitting jobs, unable to stick with any. So Jeremy has been unable to keep a job for long, and it's already been a year. Jeremy, what job are you doing now? I'm working part-time at a pub. I've never worked in food and beverage before, but it's interesting, and I think I finally found my calling. Really? That's great, but isn't the income from a part-time job in a restaurant kind of low? That's fine. I'm currently apprenticing, aiming to go independent. So you plan to own your place someday? Exactly. The income's small now, but I'm working hard for my goal. Then take this. Treat yourself to something nice for once. Jeremy still put on a good show in front of his parents, but as always, it was all lies. He quit the pub job 4 days after this conversation, lying and even taking an allowance from his parents this time. I couldn't help but feel disappointed in my husband, so I decided to be firmer than before. Hey Jeremy, later please. I'm at a good part in the movie. You can pause it. I grabbed the remote control from the table, paused the movie, and forced a conversation. It's just pressing when you pause at the best part. What is it, Jeremy? You're 38, right? You know that's prime working age. Don't you think about the future? Spending all day at home, drinking, and just watching TV. There are plenty of 38-year-olds not working. Many people enjoy life without a job. True, work isn't everything, but those people have something else they're dedicated to. Do you have something like that? Yeah, you're upset about me not working. I'll look for another part-time job. Jeremy seemed intent on only working part-time. Considering his reasons for leaving his job and his struggles with job hunting, I had been careful not to hurt him. But it was time for Jeremy to bounce back. I needed to be stricter. One day at work, I got a text from Jeremy. Dad's retiring, so we're going to Germany to celebrate. Starting today, borrowing your platinum card, got to splurge on your credit card. I panicked and called him immediately. What do you mean, a trip? Just what I said. I don't get it. Just what I said. Please explain. So many things are wrong here. It's fine to celebrate Brandon's retirement, but he should have consulted me before using my money and borrowing the credit card. More like stealing. And why am I paying for a trip to Germany that I'm not going on? Jeremy was probably bragging to his parents, claiming the money was from his savings, not my credit card. Thinking about it infuriated me, but one thing Jeremy said caught my attention. You said you borrowed a credit card, the one for our house. Yeah, why do I have a platinum card? Some people think you need a high income for it, but that's not true. Credit history, stable income, and other factors matter, and it's attainable in your 40s. The annual fee is high, but I use it for the benefits and points. However, that credit card is in my wallet. So you took the credit card from home. Yeah, so I'm counting on you for the payment. Jeremy, elated about his trip to Germany, was speaking to me in a provocative tone. I had been patient with Jeremy for a long time, but this seemed like a good opportunity. Jeremy thought he was clever, taking my credit card and being all cheerful, but he was in for a surprise. What are you doing? We need to go. Got it. I'm coming. Sorry, I need to move on now. I'll hear the details when I get back. Just one more thing, the credit card you took won't work. What? That can't be right. It's in Emily's name, and the expiry date is this month. It's short, but it shouldn't be a problem. You're lying, right? Emily, you're lying to stop me from using the card, aren't you? Yes, it expires this month. That's why I've already received a new credit card. What does that mean? So I have 2 credit cards to use for a while now. Sometimes with my credit card, when the new one is activated, the old one stops working. And I've already started using the new card. So the one you took won't work. You're kidding, right? If you don't believe me, I can send you the URL to the credit card website, or you could just try using the card. It would be amusing to see you try to pay with a card that doesn't work. This credit card really won't work. Hey, hurry up. I heard his parents calling him from the background of the phone call, but Jeremy, realizing the credit card wouldn't work, seemed too flustered to hear them. What should I do? I told them I'd pay for everything except the round-trip travel. Oh, they covered the flight. Yes, Dad felt bad about having all the trip costs covered. What should I do? I'm about to take a cab, and I don't even have money for that. That's not my problem. You said you would pay for everything but the flight. If so, using my credit card in the first place was wrong. Pay with your own money. How can I? I don't have any money. Right. Jeremy, you haven't been working seriously. It's your fault for trying to look good, taking your parents on a trip without money. I'm at work, so I have to hang up now. I just wanted to tell him about the credit card. Wait. I hung up and returned to work. Jeremy, unable to pay even for the cab, would have to be honest with his parents. That night, after I finished work, I had a call from Laura. I heard from Jeremy. He tried to pay with your credit card and lied about working. Sorry for the trouble. No, don't apologize, Laura. I'm sorry for the inconvenience about the credit card. Are you okay with the money? We'll cover this trip's cost when we get back. I'll make Jeremy apologize and find a job immediately. I'm sorry, Laura, but I'm considering divorcing Jeremy. Divorce because of this. It's part of it, but Jeremy has been taking money from me for a while. What? I stopped giving Jeremy money to curb his drinking. He started a part-time job and bought his own alcohol, but the salary from part-time work shouldn't be enough for daily drinking. Jeremy was taking money from my wallet to buy alcohol. Over a year, he repeatedly stole amounts ranging from $7 to $70. The sum became significant. I had been strict with Jeremy, hoping he would eventually turn things around. But when he stole my credit card for his trip, it wasn't just about $75 anymore. This leap in the MTH he took convinced me that he had no intention of improving. I respect your decision. Should I tell Jeremy about the divorce? Could you just tell him I want a divorce? We'll discuss the rest when he returns home. About an hour later, the next morning after my call with Laura, Jeremy called. He must have heard about the divorce from Laura, but I had asked her to wait until he was back to discuss it. Too exhausted, I decided not to answer his call. The next morning, after returning from work, I found Jeremy at home. He had cut his trip short. "I'll work properly now. Please don't leave me," he pleaded as I entered the living room. Seeing Jeremy, he immediately apologized. His regrets seemed sincere but came too late. He had a whole year to change yet still asked for another chance. I had warned him repeatedly, yet he squandered every opportunity. I'm not going to give Jeremy another chance because he gave up on me. My mind is made up. Can you leave, please? Don't say that. If you don't leave, should I call someone to help you pack your things? I'll move out only if you can afford the rent here. Jeremy fell silent. He didn't even have the money for next month's rent, let alone an income. My words and the reality of the impending divorce made him realize the severity of his situation. With nothing to take, Jeremy seemed to be leaving the house, probably heading to his parents' place. I thought about asking if he had money for transportation, but Jeremy isn't a child. He should manage his own affairs, money or not. I sadly watched Jeremy leave the house. After leaving, Jeremy went to his parents' house. Later, I received a call from Linda. My parents-in-law let Jeremy stay for one night, but then asked him to leave the next day. They thought he might become too reliant on them if he stayed. Creating a situation where he must fend for himself was perhaps their intention. It must have been painful as parents to send their son away, but they made a tough decision for Jeremy's recovery. Kicked out from his parents' home, Jeremy came back to our house, pleading with me. "Please help me. I've got nowhere to go and no money." That's the result of your own actions. You need to handle it yourself. Everyone deals with their hardships. Maybe sometimes it's necessary to ask for help, but all you have done in the past year is abandon your responsibilities and do as you please. I didn't let Jeremy into the house and turned him away from the doorstep. The divorce eventually went through. Jeremy was reluctant, but with the support of his parents, it happened quicker than expected. I have no idea what happened to Jeremy after we split up. He's probably still jumping from one job to another and making excuses for himself. I used to think I'd feel lonely without him, but to my surprise, I didn't feel lonely at all. Instead, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Living with Jeremy had been incredibly stressful. His attitude and constant need for reassurance kept me on edge. I was always walking on eggshells, afraid of saying something that might upset him. Now without him around, I don't have to worry about that anymore. Without Jeremy, my life has become much more comfortable. I hadn't realized just how much of a burden our relationship had been. I was constantly trying to support him, both emotionally and financially, and it drained me. Now I can focus on myself and my own well-being. I'm relieved that I didn't let Jeremy drag me down with him. I was always trying to help him, hoping he would change, but it never happened. Letting go of that responsibility has been freeing. I no longer have to cater to anyone else's needs or deal with anyone else's problems. I can finally live my life on my own terms without having to accommodate anyone else. It's a fresh start, and I'm embracing it fully. I have more time for myself, more energy to pursue my own interests, and a clearer mind to think about my future. I'm grateful for this new chapter in my life, free from the stress and worry that Jeremy brought into it. My name is Mia, and for about as long as I've been Adam's wife, I was also a doctor. We had our good moments together and the tough ones. Must make that clear now. All of those 32 years passed so suddenly. Our spacious home, large and warm with a life of its own, especially when Larry was present as well as Brian. Larry and Brian were like water and oil, complete opposites, but equally brought happiness into our lives. Adam and I were both doctors. We had busted our butts trying to raise a decent life for our family. We eventually saved up enough after a few years to buy a couple of apartments and start renting them out for some side cash. Everything was going good until Adam came home one day, white as a ghost and more serious than I had seen him in years. "Mia, we have something to tell you," he groaned as set the medical bag in his arms down at the entrance. "Last week I had a few MVAs done. The results, they came back. It's cancer, Mia." The months that followed were a whirlwind of hospital visits, treatments, and endless hours spent in waiting rooms. Adam fought bravely, but the cancer was relentless. Watching the strongest man I knew weaken and fade away was heartbreaking. No amount of medical knowledge could prepare me for that kind of pain. One evening, as we sat quietly in the living room, Adam took my hand and said, "Mia, if things don't go the way we hope, you need to make sure everything is taken care of with the boys. The will is all set, and you'll be fine financially." Not long after that conversation, he was gone. The funeral was a solemn event with family, friends, and colleagues coming from all over to pay their respects. But it was the quiet in the house after everyone left that hit me the hardest. The empty spaces where Adam used to be, his belongings still in their usual places. It was painful to see and remember. A few days after the funeral, I was in the kitchen trying to figure out what to do with all the leftover food when Larry stormed in, his face full of worry and anger. Brian followed behind him, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's will," Larry said, getting straight to the point as he always did. I sighed and put down the cling film I was holding. "Yes, I know. Your father left everything to me. He wanted to make sure I was." Larry slammed his hand on the counter. "But what about me and Brian? We're his sons. It's not fair that we get nothing." Brian stepped in, trying to calm things down. "Larry, let's not rush into this. Mom's still grieving, and we can sort this out without fighting." Larry shot him a look and said, "It's easy for you to say. You're not thinking about the future like I am." I leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of their stares. "Your father and I built this life together, and he trusted me to take care of things." "But I understand what you're saying, Larry. It's not my intention to leave you out." "So what then?" Larry asked, crossing his arms and raising his voice. "Do we just wait until you decide it's the right time to give us our share?" "Larry, watch your tone." I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I am still your mother." Brian stepped between us, holding up his hands like a referee. "Both of you, please. This isn't helping. Mom, maybe there's a middle ground here." I nodded and rubbed my temples, thinking it over. "Okay, here's what we can do. The apartments your father and I invested in, the ones downtown." "Yes, those," Larry interrupted. I gave him a look that told him to be quiet for a moment. "I was thinking you each take one. They're yours to live in or rent out, and from the savings, let's say, $320,000 each to help you get started with whatever you need." Larry bit his lip, clearly doing the math in his head. "And the rest of the stuff, the house, the money?" he asked. "That stays with me for now," I replied. "When I'm gone, it will come to you, as your father wanted." Larry looked like he wanted to argue more, but Brian nudged him and said, "Let's think about this. It's a fair start. Mom's not leaving us with nothing." Larry finally nodded, though he still seemed unhappy. "Fine, but I want this in writing, Mom. No more surprises." "Of course," I agreed. We'll get everything documented properly. As they left the kitchen, I could hear Brian whispering to Larry, "Give her a break, will you? She's doing her best." Larry muttered something under his breath that I couldn't catch, and honestly, I didn't really want to. As I washed up the dishes, I wondered if Adam could see us and what he would think. I hoped I was making the right choice, but only time would tell, and time, that tricky thing, isn't always on your side. It was a sunny afternoon, one of those rare days that makes everything feel okay, when Larry brought Julie over to meet me for the first time. They hadn't been dating long, but Larry was head over heels for her. You could tell by the way he was fussing over her, which wasn't like him at all. They walked in, and right away Julie had this confident air about her, like she owned the place. She was dressed up and strolled into my living room with barely a hello, her eyes scanning everything around. "Nice place you've got here," she said, flipping her hair back as she sat down without waiting to be invited. Larry was sitting beside her, grinning like a fool. I forced a smile, trying to be a good host. "Thank you, Julie. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee sounds lovely," she replied, then turned to Larry. "Babe, make sure it's black, no sugar." Larry nodded and headed to the kitchen, leaving me alone with her in my own living room, feeling like I was the guest. The silence was awkward until she finally spoke. "So Larry tells me you're pretty well off," she said, looking around at the decor. "I'm used to a certain standard, you know. My parents made sure of that." "That's good to hear," I said, not really sure what else to say. Larry came back with a coffee and handed Julie her cup. She took a sip and made a face. It's all right. Anyway, we've been talking about our future together, planning ahead, you know." "That's wise," I said, glancing at Larry, hoping he'd give me some clue about where this conversation was going. Julie set her cup down and said, "Yeah, and speaking of planning, we've been thinking about the wedding. You know, I want something special. Larry has probably told you. I saw this place that's perfect for a rehearsal dinner, but it's a bit pricey. It's about $50,000. I almost choked on my coffee. $50,000, just for the rehearsal dinner. Larry jumped in. "Mom, it's important to Julie. We want to start things off right." I put my cup down, feeling a storm brewing inside. "Look, that's a lot of money for a dinner, Julie. We need to be reasonable." Julie's face hardened. "Reasonable? Larry says you have the means. I don't see why we should compromise on something that important." Larry was nodding along with her, but I could see the unease in his eyes. He knew he was asking too much. "I'm all for celebrating," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "but $50,000 is more than I can justify." Julie stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm not used to compromising on my standards, Mia. I made it clear to Larry that I expected a certain standard of living." Larry tried to calm things down. "Mom, maybe we can find a middle ground." "There's no middle ground on $50,000 for a dinner, Larry." "That's final," I snapped, my patience running out. Julie picked up her purse and glared at me. "Fine. If that's how it's going to be, then maybe we need to rethink some things." They left soon after, and I sat there, stunned by what had just happened. The nerve of that girl, coming into my home, drinking my coffee, and telling me how to spend my money. It felt like a slap in the face, a wake-up call I wasn't prepared for. A few days later, I was out at the grocery store when Larry and Julie decided to drop by again. By the time I got home, Brian was awkwardly trying to entertain them in the living room. The tension in the air was so thick that it made me want to turn around and leave, but it was my house, so I gathered my courage and walked in. Julie, all dressed up as usual, handed me a list as soon as I put down my grocery bags. "Mia, we've thought a lot about the wedding gifts, and here's what we've decided on. I hope this will be easier for you to handle." I quickly looked over the list she handed me. It was surprisingly reasonable. Kitchen appliances, some nice china, even a couple of pieces of furniture. "This seems quite reasonable," I said, feeling a moment of relief. "I think these are wonderful choices, really." Larry looked at Julie with hope in his eyes, but just as I was about to discuss where we could buy these items, Julie's expression changed. Suddenly, she gasped. "Oh no, this isn't right. Give that back." She snatched the list from my hands and dug through her purse, pulling out another sheet of paper. Here's the actual list. This new list was nothing like the first. It included an apartment, a luxury car, an exclusive vacation, and even diamond jewelry. My jaw dropped. Is this some kind of joke? Julie didn't flinch. "No joke, Mia. These are the gifts we expect. Only the best for our wedding." I stared at her, then at Larry, waiting for him to say something. Anything to show he didn't agree with this craziness. But he just stood there, looking between us, clearly conflicted, but saying nothing. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Larry, why are you letting her do this? You know this is unreasonable." Julie cut in, her voice rising. "This doesn't concern you, Mia. You just need to pay up and keep quiet." Brian stood up, his face serious. "That's enough, Julie. You're not going to talk to our mom like that. This is her house, and you're way out of line. You need to leave now." The room was filled with tension as Larry and Julie gathered their things. Julie was muttering under her breath, clearly angry. "This is ridiculous. We'll remember this." They left, and the door slammed shut behind them. I sat down, feeling the weight of the whole situation pressing on me. Brian sat beside me and put an arm around my shoulders. "We'll figure this out, Mom, but you can't let them push you into giving more than you can or should. It's not right." He was right, of course, but as I sat there with my son, I couldn't help but worry about Larry. How had things gotten so out of hand? How could he not see what this was doing to our family? The silence that followed was filled with unspoken worries and fears for the future. I knew then that this was far from over. It was only going to get harder from here in the weeks that followed. I received constant phone calls from Larry. Each one was more demanding than the last, his tone desperate and sometimes almost frantic. "Mom, you don't understand. I can't look poor next to Lauren's family," he'd argue, his voice cracking with stress. "You have the money. Why can't you just help me out here?" I sat at the kitchen table, the phone pressed against my ear, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Larry, it's not about the money. It's about living within your means. Lauren's expectations are too high, and you can't keep up with them without going into serious debt." He scoffed, his frustration boiling over. "What do you know about it? I'm not going to live like a pauper. I need more from the inheritance now. The amount you've offered isn't enough." "Larry, I've offered to cover half the wedding costs up to $135,000 and give an $8,000 gift. That's more than generous. Everything has to be agreed upon with me, though, no surprises." There was a pause, then a sharp laugh from him. "That's nothing. You're just being stingy. You have $1 million sitting there. Why are you holding out on me?" "Because it's not just about the money," I replied, my patience wearing thin. "It's about not feeding into this unrealistic fantasy that's going to ruin you." He yelled loud enough that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "I don't need this. I'll handle it my way." "Forget you." And with that, the call ended. Months passed in silence. I tried to keep myself busy with daily routines, trying not to worry about Larry, but the peace was short-lived. One afternoon, the phone rang, and it was my sister-in-law, Hannah. Mia, I thought you should know. Hannah's voice was hesitant, careful. Larry is flying all the wedding guests to Bermuda. He sold his apartment to pay for it and expects you to get there on your own. He mentioned you weren't interested in helping. I hung up, a mix of anger and sorrow swirling inside me. How could he be so reckless? Before I could process it all, Brian came into the room, his expression serious. Mom, there's something you need to hear. I recorded their conversation when they were sitting here in the living room. He handed me an audio recorder. I pressed play, and the voices of Larry and Julie filled the kitchen. Your mom is just a nasty old woman with a fat wallet. We need to squeeze as much as we can out of her, and then cut her off, Julie's voice said coldly. Larry's voice responded, just as chilling. Whatever it takes, Lauren. I'm not going to let her control us. If it comes down to it, I'll kick her out in her underwear. I turned off the recorder, my hands trembling. Hearing my own son speak like that about me, his mother, was too much. The room spun as I tried to understand the depth of his betrayal. Deciding to fly to Bermuda wasn't easy, but Brian was by my side. Both of us tense but determined to face whatever awaited us. When we landed and approached the venue, I was taken aback by the sheer extravagance of it all. Flowers everywhere, lights strewn like stars across the evening sky, and music floating in the air. As we walked into the gathering, I spotted Larry and Julie mingling with the guests. They looked like the perfect couple, all smiles and laughter. My heart ached to see my son so lost in this artificial paradise. Before I could take another step towards them, Julie spotted us. Her smile vanished, replaced by a scowl as she marched over, her high heels clicking angrily against the stone pathway. You shouldn't be here, she hissed, stopping just inches from me, her voice loud enough to draw attention. This is my day, and you're not welcome. I was stunned, but before I could respond, her parents, who had overheard everything, came over. Her father, a tall and stern-looking man, spoke first. Julie, that is no way to speak to your guest, especially not to Larry's mother. His tone was firm, and it made her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Her mother, looking just as upset, turned to me with an apologetic smile. Mia, please come with us. Let's find you a place to sit. They guided us away to a table at the edge of the setup. It was clear that this spot was an afterthought, with no proper setting. The ceremony started soon after, with speeches that felt empty given the tension. Then, unexpectedly, I was handed the microphone. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my resolve firm. I came here today to wish my son and his new wife a happy future. I began, my voice steady despite how I felt inside. But I also believe in honesty and integrity, qualities that have been sadly missing in the events leading up to this day. Julie's face went from pink to red, her eyes glaring at me with anger. I was asked for money time, and again in amounts that no reasonable person would find justifiable. When I couldn't meet these demands, I was threatened with being cut off from my family and future grandchildren. My voice cracked a little, but I continued. Brian, seeing my distress, stepped closer and put a supportive hand on my shoulder. I nodded at him, then played the audio recording he had made. Julie's voice filled the air, cold and calculating, discussing how they would get more money from me. Larry's voice agreed, saying he was willing to leave me with nothing for the sake of his bride. The crowd murmured, shocked and disapproving. I turned off the recorder, and the silence was heavy. I gave my son an apartment and $35,000, and yet it was never enough. Today, I'm making it clear that I will not be treated as an ATM or threatened. I am disowning Larry and Julie. I wish them well, but from this day forward, I am choosing to remove myself from their lives. The reaction was immediate. Julie screamed, her voice shrill and wild. "You've ruined my wedding. I curse you." After everything that had happened, coming back home was bittersweet. In the quiet, I made a decision that even surprised me. I quit my job. I had spent years healing others as a doctor, but now it was time to heal myself and rebuild the life that recent events had shaken. Brian, bless his heart, had just graduated from art college and was full of ideas and ambition. With the $37,000 I gave him, Brian opened his own tattoo parlor. It wasn't just any shop. It quickly became a place where art and skin came together in beautiful ways. Brian put his heart and soul into his work, and it paid off. He started entering tattoo contests, and soon his name was on everyone's lips in the local community. Before we knew it, he was opening more locations, creating a network of salons that became a hot spot for tattoo enthusiasts. I'd watch him sketch late into the night, his dedication a sharp contrast to the chaos his brother had chosen. "You're doing amazing, Brian," I'd say, pride swelling in my chest. During these peaceful months, Larry reappeared. One afternoon, he showed up at the door, his eyes tired, his shoulders slumped, a far cry from the ambitious, sharp man he used to be. "Mom, I need to talk," he said, not waiting for an invitation to sit down. His voice was weary, so different from the demanding tone I had grown used to. I sighed and motioned for him to continue. "What is it, Larry?" "It's Lauren. She's driving me crazy, wanting more and more. Nothing's ever enough. I got a second job, but it's still not enough for her." His words were filled with desperation, but they couldn't erase the past so easily. "Larry, I warned you. I told you that living like that with someone like her was unsustainable." He rubbed his face, frustration clear. I know you did, but I thought." His voice trailed off, hopelessness replacing any explanation. "Thought what? That money would just appear because you wanted it to." My tone was harsh, years of pent-up frustration making it hard to soften my words. "Look at your brother. He started with the same amount and made something of himself without stepping on others." Larry bristled. "Yeah, well, not everyone's like Brian, are they? I have rights to the inheritance too, remember. And when you're gone, it'll come to me." That was the last straw. "Get out, Larry," I said, my voice cold and firm. "And don't come back. Not this time. You chose your path." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. But then he turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind him. As I stood in the silence that followed, Brian came downstairs, having heard the last part of our exchange. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked. I nodded, wrapping my arms around him. "I am now, thanks to you. Let's just focus on the good we can do and the life we can build." He hugged me back, his presence a comforting reminder that not everything was lost. In that moment, I knew that despite the hardships, the journey was still worth it. We had each other, and that was enough to keep moving forward. After the storm with Larry had passed, our home settled into a calm I hadn't felt in years. It was during this peaceful time that Brian brought someone special home. Her name was Joyce, and she was everything Julie wasn't: kind, humble, and genuinely caring. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship grew stronger, and soon they announced their engagement. The wedding was nothing like Larry's extravagant affair. It was a simple, heartfelt ceremony in our backyard. Flowers from the garden, homemade decorations, and a small group of close friends and family made the day perfect. During the reception, I pulled Brian aside and said, "You've chosen a wonderful woman," my voice thick with emotion. He squeezed my hand and replied, "I learned from the best," giving me a knowing look. Life moved quickly after that. They sold the apartment I had given Brian, added some of their savings, and bought a small, cozy house just a few miles away. One sunny afternoon, while we were having tea in their new living room, Joyce shared some exciting news. "Mia, we're expecting twins," she announced, her eyes shining with joy. I nearly dropped my cup, overwhelmed with happiness. "Twins? Oh my goodness, that's wonderful." Brian beamed, his pride evident. "We wanted you to be the first to know. We're really happy, Mom." "Twins," I repeated, letting the words sink in. Grandchildren, it was a new chapter, one I was eager to begin. As for Larry, news from him was rare. The last I heard, he had divorced Julie. She had taken nearly everything in the split, leaving him to start over in another city. Despite the pain he had caused, it hurt to know he was out there somewhere, struggling because of his choices. One evening, as I sat looking through old photo albums, Brian came and sat beside me. He noticed a picture of Larry and me from years ago. "Do you ever hear from him?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No, after everything, he's chosen his path, and I have to respect that, even if it breaks my heart." Brian put an arm around me. "He's still my brother, Mom. Maybe one day he'll come around." Maybe, I agreed, though I wasn't really sure if he ever would. I believed it too, but for now, we have plenty to keep us busy, especially with those twins on the way. Brian chuckled. "Yeah, you're about to be the busiest grandma in town." We both laughed, and the sound filled the room with warmth. Despite the past, despite the mistakes and heartaches, this moment with Brian felt like everything was exactly as it should be. Life was moving forward, and so were we, with new hopes and dreams just around the corner. Guys, so then I had this massive epiphany about how slight and miserable my sister is. I've got the perfect idea. What kind of idea? Well, just watch closely. The most beautiful white dress, like one she would wear in a carriage on the way to get married, Jessica suggested with a wave of her hand that might as well have been for Joe. As she opened it, while still clutching onto my hand, she glanced around at the guests and said proudly, "Does anyone fancy taking my sister off our hands?" Not very well educated and not far off getting along in years, is she? After these words, the sister looked over with a smug, almost maliciously smile. Still, she hadn't fully realized the amount of wrong she was doing. The atmosphere in the room changed quickly with the blunder she had just made. Whispers flittered through the room, and those sitting across from Jessica began to give her frosty glares. But unaware, Jessica tightened her grip on the microphone one more time. "Come on, sister, you need to sell yourself more. There are plenty of handsome doctors here. You really don't understand what you've done, do you?" Huh? In the next moment, an unexpected major incident occurred. My name is Emily Nichols, a plain 29-year-old working adult. I don't have any particularly outstanding features, except for one unusual fact. After graduating from middle school, I pursued a career in law and obtained my attorney's license. I have a sister named Jessica, 2 years my junior. She's charming in appearance and sociable by nature, so she has always been treated specially by our family. I am not particularly noticeable in appearance, just plain, and I fit within the average range in terms of style. Moreover, I am not especially charming, so I was never much cherished by my family or relatives. I hardly felt any affection and was rather treated coldly within our home. I couldn't compete with Jessica's natural charm, and she monopolized our parents' passionate love. On the other hand, all I received were harsh looks. I worked as hard as I could in my studies, earning good grades in the hope of attracting even a little attention from my family. But I could never outshine her. Eventually, tired of striving for my family's love, I decided to take a different path. Giving up on being loved, I poured even more effort into my studies and dedicated myself to studying, promising myself to find my worth. Deepening my knowledge gave me confidence, and my efforts led to visible results. I hoped that the success I achieved through academics would one day lead to a word of praise from my parents. Holding on to this faint hope, I continued to sit at my desk in my study until late at night. Throughout my middle school years, I always maintained the top spot in my class and outpaced the other students in every test. Despite this, not once did I receive words of praise from my parents during those long school years. Instead, I was often met with what felt like reproach for my grades. It's not just about being at the top. You need to get nearly perfect scores in every subject. Yes, even if you score 95% in science, it's not perfect. But this recent exam was really difficult. Excuses again and again. Your insufficient efforts are why you end up with such results. Mother's voice had a sharpness like ice. It's truly disagreeable. Are you intending to flaunt those less-than-perfect grades? All I could do was apologize. Yes, I'm sorry, I murmured softly. No matter how much time and effort I invested, my results never matched my parents' idea of perfection. They never acknowledged my efforts. Any score less than 100% was just a reason for reprimand. But more than my parents' coldness, my sister Jessica's seemingly innocent words hurt more. "Oh, sister, you're not getting lectured again, are you?" She entered my private space without permission and smirked at my report card. Good grades and still scolded. That's sad. I get praised for barely passing. Did you come here just to say that? I was worried maybe you were down again, but I didn't expect such a cold reception. Jessica feigned concern with her words. If you were really worried, you wouldn't speak to me like that, I retorted. See, that's your problem. You're always like this, so standoffish. That's why Dad and Mom don't show you love. It's because of that. Jessica's gaze was as cold as ice as she looked down on me with unmistakable contempt. For a brief moment, that attitude was palpable even from her departing figure. After she left, the sound of her cheerful laughter with our parents could be heard from the living room. I should have been accustomed to this kind of situation by now, but the sadness that suddenly welled up couldn't be contained, and tears naturally streaked down my cheeks. I had told myself over and over that I didn't need my parents' expectations, that I wouldn't be swayed by Jessica's words. Despite that resolve, my emotions betrayed me, and tears fell freely. In my hand was the report card, now crumpled beyond recognition, wrinkled within my clenched hand. I resolved again to stand on my own, to break free from this suffocating family environment, and I determined that excelling in my studies and enhancing my abilities was essential for that escape. From that moment, I threw myself into my studies with even greater zeal than before. One day, as the autumn breeze swept through the classroom windows, I received an unexpected announcement from my father. "Emily, you will not pursue high school, but will immediately start looking for a job," he stated coldly. I was at a loss for words, unable to mask my confusion. "Why would you say something like that?" I asked with an expressionless face. My father replied, "Further investment in you is unnecessary. If you want to go to high school, pay for it with your own earnings. If that's impossible, then you have no choice but to give up. But I'm still in middle school. Work opportunities are limited for me. How am I supposed to?" My protest fell on deaf ears. "Then you must resign yourself to this. After discussing it with your mother, we've decided to concentrate our finances on Jessica. We can't afford to spend more on you," he declared definitively. "That's not fair." I screamed internally, but my father's decision was unshakable. His abrupt words seemed to drain all the color from the world around me, painting my world in shades of gray. The faces of my mother and sister, who stared at me as I stood frozen, bore smiles that were uncomfortably unhidden in their glee. I understand much more now. For example, there were options to cover high school expenses, such as finding schools that offer tuition waivers or gaining scholarship information. However, back then, without the knowledge to access such information, I was simply devastated by the closure of my path to further education. Since that day, my passion for learning faded rapidly. The praises of my homeroom teacher, who had always admired my grades, rang hollow, and the lack of tension about education at home made my prospects of advancing to higher education even more hopeless. Eventually, I stepped into the next stage of my life, working at a local factory immediately after graduation. At the time, I was not yet of age to live independently and support myself. Therefore, until I reached the age of 18, I continued to work as hard as I could. My salary from the job was primarily contributed to the household, and the meager amount I kept for myself was saved for the future. Those difficult days felt like crawling through an endless tunnel. On my 18th birthday, I finally left that house, leaving a single letter for my family. With my decision in my heart, I walked away from that home that now only existed in my memories. The family's reaction afterward was, ironically, as if I had never existed. Complete silence without a single phone call or letter. Initially, living apart from my family caused me heartache, and the loneliness cast a shadow over my days. However, as time passed, the loneliness gradually eased with the business of work. Since moving out and starting an independent life, the stress I had felt at home disappeared, and I began to experience a mental spaciousness I had never felt before. This newfound peace of mind reignited a new enthusiasm within me. I regained my former passion for academia and decided to start learning anew. As I began to study again after a long hiatus, I started with the basics, reviewing them diligently. The joy of learning filled my heart once more, and before I knew it, I was continuing my studies with ease. After that, I started to delve into high school textbooks and simultaneously began extensive reading. During my reading journey, I became fascinated by books on law, which sparked a profound interest in the legal profession. With my education having ended in junior high, the career of a lawyer seemed distant. Yet I serendipitously learned about the preliminary examination system. This system presented a possibility, even for someone with my educational background, to take the bar exam. With this new information, my dedication to studying intensified. I utilized every possible moment at home and even during short breaks at work. I was committed to memorizing legal terms during lunch and ensuring that my preparation for the bar exam never waned. The workplace was populated with individuals from the generation above me, most of whom were around my parents' age. They saw my earnest efforts and united to support me. At the age of 23, I managed to pass the exam. After passing the exam, I left long-term employment at the factory and secured a position at a top-notch law firm. Following roughly 4 years of training there, I set out on my own to open my law practice. Now I spend my days contentedly serving as a legal consultant for a hospital. Yet sometimes, I ponder, what if I told my parents about becoming a lawyer? I wonder how they would react. Sometimes I harbor the hope that now I could meet the expectations they might have had. Nevertheless, I have not shared anything with them, and somewhere in my heart, I believe I will continue not to reach out to them. However, an unexpected reunion with my family came sooner than anticipated. One evening, after finishing work, I came home to find a message on my smartphone from my younger sister, Jessica, saying she was getting married. Jessica is getting married. I murmured to myself softly. My sister, now 27, was engaged to a doctor, and I received a notification that her wedding was scheduled for next month. They wished for my attendance. Despite the long period of estrangement from Jessica and my parents, the hesitation to meet them was there. But as a family member, I couldn't overlook this significant event and sent a reply to attend. A prompt response from my sister arrived, outlining the exact date and location of the ceremony. Suddenly, the message ended with a note, "Don't forget the wedding gift," which made me smile wryly to myself. Perhaps Jessica, rather than wanting to wholeheartedly welcome me, was expecting a wedding gift. Deciding to use the wedding as an occasion to reunite with the family, and then to part ways again, I firmed up this resolution. On the day of Jessica's wedding, I donned a carefully selected blue dress and headed to the venue for the ceremony. After completing the entrance formalities, I took my seat in the area reserved for family, where my father and mother were already seated. "You have some nerves showing up here. You must be doing well for yourself with the meager earnings from the factory," my father said coldly. "Indeed, you're right. Introducing someone like her as family does not do us any credit as parents," my mother added with a tone of disdain. "Jessica shouldn't have invited someone like you," my father continued. I told them exactly that, but they insisted on receiving the celebration money regardless, my mother stated quietly. Despite my presence right before them, they carried on this conversation without any hesitation. This was the reality. I faced a faint hope that sharing my side of the story might bridge the gap between my family and me, but it was swiftly shattered. I felt it crumbling inside. Both my father and mother seemed to completely avoid conversation with me. In the quiet, I glanced around the venue and noticed some familiar faces among the groom's side. Haven't I seen that person somewhere before? I mused to myself, feeling a sense of déjà vu with the person sitting next to them as well. While tracing my uncertain memory, I looked up the groom's name, and my suspicion turned into conviction. The connection I had anticipated became clear. I couldn't entirely hide my faint surprise inside. Such a coincidence, it was almost like a twist of fate, I marveled. However, I decided to keep my emotions in check and spend the day quietly as part of the ceremony. As the program proceeded, the bride and groom made a glamorous entrance, followed by his team of guests who spoke warm words and performed entertaining acts that softened the atmosphere. As time passed, the banquet gradually shifted to dinner and then to photo-taking sessions. Throughout this time, my parents got up without acknowledging my presence and moved towards the front where the bride and groom awaited. Jessica, as if drawn by a magnet, clung close to the bride and groom, showing a happy smile with each photograph taken. Pretending to feel nothing about the scene unfolding before me, I focused silently on the meal in front of me. But unexpectedly, my sister Jessica quietly approached me. She came closer with a smile, but her eyes had a spark of something more than excitement at seeing her sister after so many years. It seemed like she was up to something else. "Big sis, it's been such a long time, hasn't it? Are you happy to spend time together like this?" she asked lightly. I nodded quietly, expressing my genuine thoughts. "Yes, the banquet food is really wonderful." With a sarcastic smile, Jessica continued, "You can't get such luxurious food at the factory you work at, can you? You should be grateful for this opportunity." Something inside me felt like it was being torn apart, but I did not show it on my face. However, Jessica's words became sharper, tauntingly piercing me. "Oh dear, did I upset you? I'm sorry, but it's natural for you to be envious, isn't it? Your little sister marrying a doctor and all." The phrase "I'm sorry" came from Jessica's mouth flippantly, as if it were a meaningless ornament. I kept my expression unchanged and quietly waited for my next move. At that moment, Jessica whispered in my ear, "Big sis, because I feel sorry for you. I've come up with a great idea." Despite maintaining my composure, I asked with suspicion, "A great idea? What is it?" Jessica said with satisfaction, "You'll see. Just watch closely." Then, adorned in an elegant wedding dress, Jessica gathered the attention of everyone around as she received a microphone from the staff. Suddenly, she announced loudly to the guests, "Ladies and gentlemen, you may not be aware, but my sister is here. She may not have the highest education or be the youngest, but if there is anyone kind-hearted enough, could you please take her under your wing?" My face turned red. "What are you saying, Jessica?" I exclaimed. Jessica continued even louder. "Although she doesn't earn much and leads a modest life, is there someone here who can brighten my sister's future?" As the gazes of those around focused on me, Jessica seemed to be enjoying my confusion with a smug smile. At that moment, a breathtaking scene unfolded. Jessica's blasphemous attitude escalated, and astonishingly, even our normally gentle parents chimed in with her tune. "Please treat her kindly," they said. This frivolous comment from my parents was the last straw for me. Rage swirled within me. To ridicule a person so much at such a joyous occasion, how far would they go to be satisfied? I couldn't believe it. But now it was time for them to be confronted with reality. As the atmosphere around shifted and the murmuring in the venue gradually increased, Jessica, unaware that she was the center of attention, once again took the microphone, cheerfully calling out, "Emily, look, there are so many doctors gathered here. It's your chance." I maintained silence but conveyed a strong will through my somber gaze. "This is the end for you," I thought. Confused, Jessica could only respond with, "A." I continued more calmly towards her. "You'll understand soon just how terrible your actions have been." Just as Jessica tried to make an excuse, the groom suddenly raised his voice to address the venue. "Wait, please. Why are you leaving your seats?" The venue was riveted by his voice. Looking towards the groom, it was evident that all his colleagues from work were standing up, heading for the exit. Even as the groom tried to stop them, a dignified man who appeared to be the hospital director spoke to the groom with determination. The recent remarks of the bride were so unpleasant that I'm in disbelief. "I apologize, but we can no longer stay here. We will take our leave now." In response, the groom hurried to stop the hospital director, offering to take responsibility for her words and actions. "Please wait. I admit her words were inappropriate. I'll speak to her directly and ensure she undergoes a serious change in awareness." However, the hospital director pointed out the gravity of the issue and revealed a background that the groom was unaware of. The crux of the problem isn't just that. Do you not know what kind of person her sister is? The groom, though confused, admitted, "Eh? No, I only met her sister for the first time today, and all I've heard was that she worked in a factory after graduating from middle school." The hospital director could not hide his irritation at the groom's ignorance. "Don't be ridiculous. Her sister is a respected lawyer and also serves as the legal advisor to our hospital." The groom was shocked to learn of this fact, indicating he was unaware that I was the hospital's legal advisor. The lawyer is our hospital's advisor, and not only that, the hospital where my sister's husband-to-be works is actually the hospital I work at. The reason why the groom looked familiar was that I had seen him several times at hospital events. The other guests probably came to the same realization upon seeing me. My sister's inappropriate comments only added fuel to the fire, and that's why the hospital director openly expressed his outrage. Although the groom himself is a member of the hospital's medical staff and has no direct relation to me, to the hospital director and other staff, the legal advisor is of significant importance. The groom's face turned even redder in an instant, and he stepped toward Jessica, raising his tone of voice in reproach. "What on earth is this? Because of your carelessness, my reputation is now tarnished." Jessica stumbled over her words for a moment, then defended herself like a bewildered child. "It's not like that. I truly had no idea that my sister was in such a prestigious position." The groom, growing more indignant, continued to reproach Jessica for her ignorance. "Ignorance is no excuse. How can you speak so lightly and disrespectfully of your own sister? As a human being, your behavior is at the very bottom. You've truly lost sight of what's valuable." Jessica, desperately trying to elicit some understanding, pleaded, "Wait a minute, listen. I have a good reason." However, the groom, without leaving room for her explanation, declared decisively, "The withdrawal from the marriage itself. I have no interest in hearing your excuses. Our marriage discussion ends here." Shocked by his words, Jessica collapsed on the spot as if her soul had left her, her complexion turning deathly pale. Then, in a fit of anger, the groom disappeared from the wedding hall along with the guests present. As I was about to leave, I heard a desperate cry from my sister behind me. "Please help me, Emily." But without being swayed by her cries, I confronted her with a stern tone. "Help you, you say? Why should I do such a thing for you? The situation you find yourself in is the result of the seeds you've sown. Attempting to get a laugh with a joke that mocks others, and then playing the victim when it fails is a pathetic sight that I cannot accept." Jessica, fraught with confusion and anxiety, pleaded, "Why are you using such harsh words? If I had known about your success as a lawyer..." With a quiet yet firm attitude, I responded, "Why should I need to inform someone who has never contacted me about my profession? In fact, I was planning to end our relationship after this wedding, but now, having witnessed your unfortunate end, I'm somewhat satisfied. You must be disappointed that your engagement to a doctor has been called off. Well, you'd better work hard to find your next prospect." With these words, I left the venue with dignity. From afar, I could hear the critical voices of Jessica and our parents from the guests. Everything proceeded as expected, and Jessica's marriage was no more. Our parents, who had thought a secure future was assured through Jessica marrying a doctor, expressed their anger towards her for the first time. Due to the commotion, Jessica, always pampered, couldn't withstand their anger and sought salvation with a broken heart. But I ignored her pleas without any sympathy. I never answered the phone despite repeated attempts, and I cut off all methods of contact with the family. I heard that Jessica had quit her job, now without employment, estranged from our parents, and spending her days shut in at home. As for me, I am maintaining a very satisfying state in both my work and private life, leading a peaceful existence, without any significant problems. Although the bond with my family hasn't been smooth sailing, I am fortunate to be blessed with a great deal of support from people in my professional life and day-to-day existence. This blessed environment isn't due to chance, but the result of long-term self-investment and persistent effort. There were days when I faced harsh trials, but it is because I overcame each one that I am where I am today. Reflecting on my past struggles and recognizing their value, I now hope to continue living a fulfilling life at my own pace, setting realistic goals while keeping stress to a minimum. When I think back to the day I met Alex, it feels like it was only yesterday. I was in a mom-and-pop dive looking to keep away from any and all takers. Sucking on their Rocca cheap coffee, getting straight inside my head, lost amid the chaos of thought, planlessness. That was when he came in, practically out of a film with no intense lighting or music. The ding on top of the door and smell of coffee adhesive fragments, covered up by his baby powder, ended after shave. Is this seat taken? He gestured to the chair across from me and smiled with a force that would kill you. Looks free to me, I replied, trying to sound cool and not at all flustered by his sudden appearance. We started talking, and damn, it was like we were cut from the same cloth. He was into all the junk I was, from bench-watching the same trashy series to arguing about the best pizza topping. It's pineapple, fight me. Fast forward a bit, and we're dating, not just casual meetups, but the real deal. It felt like I'd known him my whole life, and before we knew it, we were talking about getting hitched. That's when the drama started. His parents, let me tell you, were something else. The first time I met them, it was like walking into a lion's den wearing a meat dress. They had this way of smiling while sizing you up, like they were deciding whether you were worth their time or not. So you're the girl Alex can't stop yapping about, his mom said, her voice dripping with something that was definitely not warm. Guilty as charged, I shot back, trying not to let her see she got to me. They laid down the law pretty quick, telling us we needed to sign a prenup. Now, I ain't no gold digger, and I sure as hell don't need anyone's money, but that rubbed me the wrong way. I'll sign your prenup, I told them, but I've got one condition. If one of us cheats, the cheater pays up minus 100 grand. Alex looked like I'd slapped him with a fish. Babe, I'd never cheat on you, he said, all wide-eyed and serious. Yeah, well, my ex said the same thing before I caught him with his pants down, literally. So it's this or nothing. He agreed, and his parents did too, though they looked like they'd swallowed lemons. We thought that was the end of it, but boy, were we wrong. One evening, we were cuddled up on the couch, a tradition we had started since moving in together. We had this old rickety couch that we swore we'd replace, but never did because somehow it had become our spot. The TV was on, but we weren't watching. We were too busy making plans for a trip to Italy we knew we couldn't afford, but were determined to make happen. Alex, think about it. The food, the wine, the art. We have to go, I said, my eyes sparkling with excitement. Alex laughed, wrapping his arm tighter around me. Emily, babe, you had me at food. But let's face it, our bank account is more camping in the backyard than a romantic getaway to Venice. I playfully nudged him. So we'll save. We'll cut back on, I don't know, things we don't need, like your video games. He feigned horror. Not the video games. Take my shirts, my shoes, even my beloved coffee maker, but leave the games alone. We laughed, but that was us, always dreaming big but grounded in the reality of our modest lives. We didn't care, we were happy. The happiness wasn't just in the big moments. It was in the little things too, like how Alex would make breakfast on Saturdays. He couldn't cook to save his life, but he'd somehow mastered the art of scrambled eggs and toast, which he'd served with a side of his terrible coffee. I love those mornings. Hey, I'm thinking scrambled eggs today. What do you think? He'd ask, already heading to the kitchen. Only if you promise not to burn the toast this time, I'd call out, followed by, and I'm making the coffee. One day, the topic we had been avoiding came up. We were doing dishes together, a mundane task that somehow felt special because we were doing it together. Emily, we need to talk about, starting a family, Alex said, breaking the comfortable silence. I paused, a plate in hand. I know, it's scary, isn't it? What if we can't? Alex turned to me, drying his hands on a towel. Then we'll deal with it together. But we won't know until we try, right? I mean, how hard can it be? I laughed, a mix of nerves and love. Famous last words, babe. But that's how it was with us. No matter what we were facing, we faced it together. Even when his mom started dropping not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren, every chance she got, We took it in stride. "Emily, darling, when are you going to give me some grandbabies? You're not getting any younger, you know," she'd say, her voice sweet, but the message anything but. I bite my tongue, smile, and say, "We're working on it, aren't we, Alex?" And he'd jump in, "Yeah, Mom, lay off, will you? These things take time." But as the year went on, the pressure started to build, not just from his mom, but from within. We wanted a family, but it wasn't happening as easily as we had hoped. Ever since Judy found her new hobby of making my life a living hell, our home turned into a battleground, and the main weapon was her sharp tongue. It wasn't just about the occasional jibe anymore. It was an all-out war with daily assaults on my self-esteem and role as a wife. It all spiraled one Sunday lunch, a day that was supposed to be laid back and peaceful. Judy, with her uncanny timing, dropped by uninvited just as we were about to sit down. The air was tense the moment she walked in, her eyes scanning the room like she was about to conduct a military inspection. "Well, isn't this quaint?" she started, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she looked at the modest spread prepared. "You really outdid yourself, Emily. I can see you've been slaving away in the kitchen all morning." Her eyes briefly met mine, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Trying to keep the peace, I forced a smile. "It's nothing fancy, Judy, just something simple and quick. Please have a seat." As we sat down, the barrage began in earnest. "You know, Emily," Judy said, loading her voice with condescension, "I was talking to Mrs. Henderson the other day, and she mentioned how her grandson was just born. It got me thinking, what are you and Alex going to give me some good news? It's not like you're getting any younger." I felt my cheeks burn, a mix of embarrassment and anger. I glanced at Alex, hoping for some support, but he was suddenly very interested in his plate. "Mom, come on," Alex finally muttered, but it was half-hearted, and we all knew it. Judy plowed on, relentless. "And Alex, dear, I don't mean to be cruel, but you're not a charity. You work hard for your money. Why waste it on Emily if she can't do her basic duties as a wife? A cleaning service and a cook would be much more efficient, don't you think?" That's when I couldn't hold back any longer. "Judy, I am trying my best here. It's not like I don't want to have kids. And as for the house and my cooking, well, I didn't realize marriage was a service contract." Judy scoffed. "Well, it's not a free ride either. You have responsibilities, Emily, which you are clearly not fulfilling." The room was heavy with tension, and I could feel the tears pricking at the back of my eyes. But what hurt the most wasn't Judy's words. It was Alex's silence. He finally spoke up, but it wasn't to defend me. "Yeah, Mom has a point. Maybe we should consider getting some help around here. It would make things easier for you, too." "Easier for me?" His words felt like a betrayal. It was clear I was on my own in this. Over the next few days, Judy's visits became more frequent, and with each visit, her criticism grew sharper. She'd inspect the house, pointing out every speck of dust or pillow out of place. "You call this clean?" She'd scoff. My eyes must be deceiving me because this looks like a pigsty. Then came the comments about my appearance. "Is that what you're wearing?" You know, a wife should dress to please her husband. It's no wonder Alex is always so tired. He has to come home to this. I tried to fight back. "Judy, I don't dress for Alex. I dress for myself. And he's always so tired because he works hard, not because of what I wear." But it was like talking to a brick wall. Judy had made up her mind about me, and nothing I said or did would change it. Alex's stance, or lack thereof, was the biggest blow. Each night after his mom's departure, we'd argue. "Why won't you stand up for me, Alex? She's walking all over us, and you're just letting her." "Emily, she's old, set in her ways. What do you want me to do? kick my own mom out. No, but I want you to be my husband, to stand by me, not her. It was clear this was more than just about Judy's disapproval. It was about us, our marriage, and whether we were strong enough to stand together or let Judy's criticisms tear us apart. As the days turned into weeks, I realized this wasn't just a phase. It was a full-blown siege. If we didn't do something soon, there might not be anything left to save. Things between me and Alex had been icy since Judy ramped up her campaign of critique. But it wasn't just the home front that was feeling the strain. Alex himself had started acting weird, not in a he's just stressed at work kind of way. It was something else, something that made my stomach twist in knots. It started with the phone calls. Alex had always been pretty open about his phone. We didn't keep secrets from each other, but then he started stepping out of the room every time he got a call. And it was always the same caller ID, John Work. Who's John Work? I asked one evening, trying to keep my voice casual. Alex flinched, a telltale sign that he was on edge. Oh, just a new guy at the office. Lots of questions, you know, he said. But it didn't stop there. Alex, who was as far from a fashionista as you could get, suddenly started caring about his appearance. Gone were the days of graphic tees and worn-out jeans. Now it was all crisp shirts, slacks, and cologne. He was using cologne now. Since when did he care about smelling like a department store? What's with the new look? Alex got a job interview or something. I joked one morning, watching him comb his hair in a way I'd never seen before. He just smirked a little too quickly. Just felt like changing things up. No harm in that, right? And the late nights at work, they were becoming a regular thing. Another long one, babe, I texted, trying not to sound too needy. Sorry, Em, this project is killing me. Won't be late, I promise. He'd text back, but the clock would tick well past midnight before I heard his keys in the door. I tried to shake the feeling that something was off, but it clung to me like a shadow. That's when I decided to hire a private detective. It felt like something out of a bad TV show, but I had to know for sure. The evidence came in a plain brown envelope. The contents were as damning as they were heartbreaking. Photos of Alex with another woman, their intimacy undeniable, captured in frozen moments that shattered our years together. But it was the recording that cut the deepest. Their conversations, filled with endearments and plans, left no room for doubt. They were in love, or at least he was with her. I sat there, the evidence spread out in front of me, a cold realization settling in. This was it. This was the proof that could anchor me in a stormy divorce, should it come to that. Photos that caught moments stolen from our life together, and words that betrayed every I love you he had ever whispered in my ear. But I kept it all a secret, a painful burden I chose to carry alone. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. I needed a plan, a way to navigate the wreckage of our marriage with my dignity intact. The following days were a blur. Alex continued his charade, and I played along, the perfect wife with a smile plastered on my face, and a heartbreaking silently. Our conversations became a dance around the truth, each word measured, every laugh forced. Everything okay, Em? You've been quiet, Alex would ask, his concerns seemingly genuine. Yeah, just tired, you know. Work's been crazy. I'd reply, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. It was just another mundane day, or so I thought, until I stumbled upon a conversation that would change everything. There I was, passing by the slightly ajar door to Alex's office, when their voices caught my attention. It was Alex and his mother, Judy, and they weren't just chit-chatting. The tone was serious, heavy with intent. I'm telling you, Mom, I can't do this anymore. It's not just about the kids. I've lost all feeling for Emily. It's like we're roommates, not husband and wife. Alex's voice, strained and tired, floated through the gap. Judy's voice, ever so sharp, replied, "Well, of course you feel that way. She's not given you a child, and let's be honest, what else has she brought to this marriage but? Let's not be hasty. My 70th birthday is coming up, and we wouldn't want to miss out on a generous gift from her now. Would we?" The cynicism in her voice was like a knife twisting in my gut. They were plotting against me, using me until they deemed it convenient to throw me aside. And after we get a nice expensive gift, we can kick her to the curb, right? Alex said, his voice cold and calculating. "Exactly, dear." "Just bide your time a little longer," Judy confirmed, her voice dripping with malice. I stood there, rooted to the spot, a mix of shock and anger boiling inside me. They were planning my exit from this family as casually as one would plan a grocery list. The hurt was deep, but it sparked something else in me, a burning desire for revenge. They thought they could use me, discard me at their convenience. I'd show them. I wasn't just some pawn in their twisted game. A few days later, during a family dinner that felt more like a farce than a meal, Judy brought up her upcoming birthday with the same smirk that I had come to despise. She leaned in and asked, "So Emily, dear, what are you planning for my birthday? Something special, I hope." I met her gaze, my face a mask of calm. "Actually, Judy, I was thinking of throwing you a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. A night you won't forget." Her eyes lit up with greed, and she exchanged a quick, satisfied look with Alex. They thought they had me cornered, but little did they know I was already 2 steps ahead. "Oh, Emily, that sounds too delightful." "Just close family, keep it intimate," Judy said, her voice oozing fake sweetness. "Of course, Judy. It'll be our pleasure," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The weeks leading up to Judy's 70th birthday felt like a slow march towards D-Day. Every smirk from her, every indifferent shrug from Alex fueled my resolve. The plan was simple yet bold, just like in the movies. Host a lavish dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant under the guise of a loving gesture, then drop the bombshell. But like any good plot, the devil was in the details. The night before the party, the tension at home was palpable. Alex, oblivious to the storm brewing, was casually lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Everything set for tomorrow?" he asked, not looking up. "Oh, you could say that," I replied, my tone bellying the turmoil inside. The day arrived, and as guests started to fill the opulent dining room reserved for Judy's celebration, the air was thick with anticipation. My heart raced, not from nerves, but from the adrenaline of what was about to unfold. Judy, ever the queen bee, basked in the attention, lavishing in the luxury of her surroundings. "Oh, Emily, you've outdone yourself. This place is exquisite," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. As we all settled in, the meal proceeded with the kind of forced mirth that comes with such family gatherings. Laughs were shared, stories exchanged, and then, as the dessert plates were cleared away, the waiter approached with the final act of the evening, the bill. He leaned in discreetly, informing us the dinner cost $33,000. Without missing a beat, I handed over my card. The gesture went unnoticed by most. It was then Alex, with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, decided to drop his bombshell. "Emily, I think it's time everyone knew. I'm tired of this of us. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, a toxic cloud that seemed to suffocate all other noise in the room. Before I could even process the full weight of his statement, Judy piped up, her voice sharp and unforgiving. "Well then, since that's out in the open, I think it's best you leave, Emily. We're celebrating family tonight, and well, you're no longer part of it." The room went deadly silent, Every eye was on me, waiting to see how I'd crumble. But I didn't. With a calm I didn't feel, I stood, nodded, and walked out without a word. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I made my way home, the finality of everything that had happened washing over me in waves. By the time I reached his apartment, a plan had formed. I packed my essentials, the numbness giving way to a cold resolve. This was it, the end of one life and the start of another. As I zipped the last suitcase, my phone started buzzing, a relentless, insistent vibration that I initially ignored. Curiosity, however, got the better of me. Judy's voice screeched from the other end. "Emily, the payment didn't go through. You need to fix this now." The sweet, sweet irony. In my preparations for the inevitable, I had secured my exit strategy. I had blocked the shared account, knowing it would be the first thing Alex would try to use against me. Oh, Judy, that's unfortunate. But since I'm no longer part of the family, as you've so eloquently put it, I'm afraid you'll have to sort this out yourself. Her outrage was palpable, even through the phone, but it was music to my ears. The chaos that unfolded was a fitting end to the farce my marriage had become. Reports came through the grapevine of the restaurant staff demanding payment of Judy's escalating tantrums, and eventually the arrival of the police to calm the storm she had become. In the end, it was Alex and his relatives who had to pull together the money to settle the bill, a poetic justice for the betrayal and humiliation they had subjected me to. The morning after the dinner disaster felt like waking up to the aftermath of a storm. I had my plan, my resolve, and a set of divorce papers in my hand as I made my way back to what used to be our shared home for the last time. The moment I stepped through the door, the air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex and Judy were there, looking like they'd been arguing. The sight of me seemed to unite them in hostility. "You've got some nerve showing up here after last night," Alex spat out, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. Judy, ever the viper, was quick to add her poison. "Ungrateful wretch. You've embarrassed us in front of the whole city. Do you know how humiliating it was to have the police calm me down? People were laughing, filming. I met their fury with a calm I didn't feel. Embarrassed? You think that's your biggest problem right now?" I tossed the divorce papers on the table, the photos of Alex's infidelity on top. "You should be more concerned with this." The color drained from Alex's face as he picked up the photos, his mother peering over his shoulder. Their outrage turned to shock, then to panic as they realized the extent of what I had. "And let's not forget the payout, shall we?" I continued, my voice steady. "You cheat, you pay $100,000 to be exact." Judy's face twisted into a snarl. "You wouldn't dare. You can't do this to us." "Oh, but I can and I will." My tone was cold final. Alex, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him, switched tactics. Please let's talk about this. We can fix it." I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and hard. "Fix it? You think you can just undo everything with a few words?" "No, Alex, it's done." Judy, ever the manipulator, tried a softer approach, her voice dripping with false concern. "Emily, darling, think about what you're doing. This will ruin us." "That ship has sailed, Judy. You should have thought about that before." The begging turned to pleading, their words a desperate scramble to salvage what they could. But my mind was made up. I was done being the victim, done with their lies and manipulations. In the end, Alex had no choice but to borrow the money from his parents to pay me. As I left that house for the last time, check in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After everything went down, I used the payout from Alex to put a down payment on a small but cozy place of my own. It's funny, how much peace you can find in the walls of a place that's just yours. where every nook feels like a sanctuary from the chaos of the past. Life's quieter now, and I like it that way. I've got a job that keeps me busy, neighbors who nod and smile, and a little garden that's all mine to tend to. But every once in a while, the grapevine tosses a juicy bit my way about Alex and Judy. Just the other day, I was grabbing coffee from the corner spot where locals hang out, and I bumped into someone from the old neighborhood. After the usual pleasantries, they leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Hey, have you heard about the latest drama with your ex and his mom?" They asked, eyes gleaming with the thrill of gossip. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and detachment taking hold. Can't say that I have. Do tell. Well, they started, clearly savoring the moment. It seems Judy's not too pleased with Alexa's new girlfriend. Word is, they've been at it like cats and dogs. Makes your situation look like a walk in the park. The conversation moved on, but as I walked away, coffee in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling of utter relief. There was a time when news like that would have sent me spiraling, but now it was just another piece of someone else's story. These days, my biggest concern is whether my tomatoes will ripen before the squirrels get to them, or if I'll ever get the hang of yoga without looking like a newborn deer on ice. Life's simpler, quieter, and infinitely sweeter on this side of chaos.